would like to call to order the board meeting for the Santa Barbara Unified School District for Tuesday, September 27th, 2011. We will begin with the flag salute.
Ready? Begin.
Senora, we have our interpreter here to provide translation for anybody who needs it.
Sí, muy buenas noches y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Mi nombre es Vivian Rodríguez y si alguien necesita la ayuda de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias. Thank you.
Gracias. We also have headsets available for the hearing impaired, as noted on our screen here. So that brings us to the introductions, proclamations, presentations, and/or recognitions. Dr. Cash?
Well, I think we should start with the recognition. We have amongst us, as I'm certain you're well aware of, somebody who was recently recognized by an international association, and that's our Deputy Superintendent, Eric Smith. We want to congratulate him and recognize his incredible accomplishment at receiving only one of 4 of the highest awards given to a school business official recently at the conference in Seattle. I asked Eric to bring it back so everyone could take a look at it.
It's got my smudge prints on it.
And I know that President Cordero attended the event as well, so.
I did. I was fortunate to attend the dinner that was held for the honorees, and it was apparent how much esteem Mr. Smith has from all of the people present, past winners included. And I think we are extremely fortunate to have you in our district. And although we already knew that, it was just confirmed even more. I heard only the highest praise for everything that you do. And we certainly would like to echo that and congratulate you on such a prestigious award.
Thank you. I'm not long for words to begin with, but in any event, Board President Cordero and I, we had a great time in Seattle, and it was especially meaningful because I was also sworn in to the ASBA Board of Directors, the first Californian to be sworn into the board in 30 years. So it was a twofer for me, and I'm glad that we had representation from our district other than just me. It was very, very special. Thank you.
And Mr. Smith promises he's going to bring us, as soon as he gets it, a copy of the video montage that they presented at the award ceremony.
I actually communicated with them today. They said in about 2 weeks I'll have it. So we'll bring it and show it on the big screen, I guess.
I think we should attach it to our website as well.
Great.
Well, congratulations, Eric. It's really a pleasure to be able to work with you.
Thank you.
I also want to let the public know that we have copies of Investment Matters for Measure H, which is an update on our parcel tax monies, how they're being spent to support student learning in our secondary schools, and that's at our back table, and for board members, that was at your seat. I want to let you know, some of you attended, we had a 90-member team of teaching and administrative staff participated in a 2-day training at La Colina Junior High School on transitioning to the Common Core standards, and I can say that what the comments I got back from most all teachers and principals was that the time spent in the school team work was very, very beneficial, that staff and principals found the opportunity to have a very frank conversation about how they would look at the Common Core, where they were as a school in understanding the Common Core and the changes that will be required not only in teaching practices but what most importantly we expect students to know and be able to do. And it was a good second or third step for us along a very long road of implementing the Common Core state standards. We will have our supplemental educational services fair on October 17th at Santa Barbara Junior High School. And we'll soon be distributing flyers to families regarding that. And last board meeting, I kind of teased you with some information about our National Merit Scholarship Program. And since it was publicly released, and in case anyone didn't hear, we have 17 students identified as National Merit semifinalists. Very exciting, 1 from San Marcos, 2 from Santa Barbara High, and 14 from Dos Pueblos. And so that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. That brings up comments from the board and/or correspondence. Board members? Mr. Herron?
Yes, I'll just mention a couple things. Again, it's been a really busy 2 weeks, a lot going on, but two of the highlights for me were last week ago Saturday was the Day of Caring put on by United Way, and 9 of our schools participated with hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, both from the public and from the schools themselves. And example would be Monroe, Adams, more parents and families than probably volunteers. I think Adams had probably close to 200 people working in their facility, as did Monroe. You could go to any part of the campus at Monroe, and there were a group of people doing things with the principal right there in the midst of it, doing the same thing. So the Dos Pueblos Drum Corps started off the program, got everybody cheering. The Page Center was absolutely filled with volunteers, and Peabody Girl Scouts were there. The San Marcos High School Madrigals sang the national anthem. It was absolutely, marvelous. So we were well represented with 9 schools all participating. The other interesting or good was the opening or ribbon cutting for the San Marcos High School football field. It is absolutely beautiful if you haven't seen it. A highlight to me was the glowing words that Mr. Hetyank received for his part in making it happen and happen so quickly and so smoothly. In essence, just the blocker for the whole process, making sure everything got done in a timely manner and all the roadblocks were taken out of the way. So it's very apropos, a football player leading the way in the charge, but to hear the nice words about you was a highlight of that night for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herron. Ms. Parker?
I'll just say real briefly, because there was one other thing that Mr. Herron was doing. I'm sure there were lots of other things that you were doing, but one of the things that he and I were at this past Saturday was our latest Masters in Governance workshop through the California School Boards Association. It was on community relations and advocacy. And we're getting close to finishing that series. But I wanted to bring it up because while you two were in Seattle and Mr. Smith was getting an award for essentially school finance, I was at a workshop down in Rancho Cucamonga making up one of the classes on school finance. And it was led by Annette Yee out of Carmel Unified and John Gray from School Services. And it was so excellent that I really strongly feel that those of you who are not going through the Masters in Governance process, you will learn so much just from taking that one module, that if you have the opportunity over the course of the next 12 months, look into that. Even after 5 years of experience on the board, I still really learned so much from that. So I really recommend it.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Ms. Deacon?
I wanted to make an announcement about a district-wide workshop that the Special Education Department is hosting on October the 12th from 6:30 to 8 at La Cumbre Junior High. This is open to all parents in the district, but specifically geared towards special education parents. And Rick Clemens, who's the director of an organization that focuses on inclusion, meaning providing in general education classrooms educational programs for special education students so they can stay with their general education peers, is going to be the presenter. And I've seen his presentation because he gave it to the special ed parents group last year, and it's very good. So I wanted to help get the word out, and representatives from the parent group, our own special education parent advisory committee will be there and available to talk to parents from their school. So it's a good networking opportunity for them. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that this is happening on October the 12th.
Great. Okay. I just wanted to follow up on a comment I made at our last board meeting. I was announcing the Adelante fundraiser for the Mexican Independence Day celebration. And I attended, and I just wanted to report back that it was a fabulous success. There were lines out the doors, people wanting to come, children, parents, community members. People were participating in the. There was a demonstration of Zumba, which is a type of aerobic exercise that had the whole crowd involved. It was quite a success, and they were anticipating that it would go over well. They did not anticipate that it would be as enthusiastic a crowd as it was. And I might add, the food was also quite delicious. So they had a very successful event. Okay, well, if that is it, we can move on then to the announcement of closed session action. There is no action to report out from our closed session this evening. So that brings us to public comments.
And we have one speaker this evening who would like to speak to an item on the consent agenda, Sherry Ray.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak with you tonight. My name is Sherry Ray. Implementation of the Linda Midbell learning processes in the classroom of Santa Barbara is a huge step forward for this school district. Dr. Mills and Dr. Cash are to be commended for their leadership in recognizing the need to provide research-based Linda Midbell training for our teachers so that they can better serve our students who learn differently. Reading is a complex skill that does not necessarily reflect intelligence and is far more complicated than most realize. It involves skills in decoding, phonemic awareness, mental imagery, and more. Some students, particularly those with dyslexia, have great difficulty developing these skills because their brains are simply wired differently. Independent peer-reviewed scientific research has confirmed Linda Midbell's effectiveness, and I know from experience how life-changing its reading program can be. 2 years ago, my then 7th grader was stuck reading at a 2nd grade level, and no amount of tutoring, computer software, or any program available in the district made any difference. He was frustrated, miserable, and hopeless about his educational future, and this affected our whole family. After a long process, the district authorized remedial services for him with Linda Midbell. For the first time in his life, he showed real progress in reading. Within months of intense training, he was reading at grade level. Follow-up testing proves the gains that he made with the Linda Midbell program have held. His confidence in academic performance as a high school freshman is solid because he can read, and he now knows he can go to college. While I am grateful for the intervention for my son, I'm very aware that providing Linda Midbell services one student at a time is very difficult and very expensive. I've appeared before you in the past and asked you that we make this reading program available for students throughout the district. And now that time has come. It's a great move for the district to develop an action plan to make the successful program available for every student who needs it. As our teachers are trained in Linda Midbell, they can offer our struggling readers a different way to learn and achieve. Implementation of this effective reading program will address the achievement gap, as well as painful self-esteem and behavioral issues
30
that occur
seconds.
when students are learning to read while their classmates are reading to learn. Now students who learn differently have the opportunity to reach their potential because they will learn to read in the way that they learn. I am thankful for the vision, leadership, and hope that this proposal offers our students and the added tool it gives our teachers. The amount of money and time this investment will ultimately save the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ray.
I'm sorry, that moves us to the acceptance of donations. May we
Mo-
have a motion?
Move to approve with appreciation.
I'll second that.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. That brings us to our consent agenda. Are there any items that board members would like to pull?
I will need to abstain from D1 because I was not at that meeting.
Okay.
I'd like to pull D3 and D6.
Okay. Are there any other items?
Uh,
that-
I was at the same meeting with Ms. Deacon, but it's not necessary to not vote. You, according to Roberts, you do not need to be present to vote, but, so I will be going ahead and voting.
Okay. Okay, any other items that we need to pull? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at mine because I have a little notation next to D4, and I'm trying to figure out what it was regarding. But I think I'm okay on that. Okay, so may we have a motion for the remainder of the consent agenda?
Well, I'll go ahead and first move to approve item D1 on the consent agenda, the minutes from July 7th.
Okay, is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay,
And then I'll move to approve the remainder of the consent items except for D3 and D6.
And I will second that.
okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
And
So-
that does include all the late admissions to those various agenda
Master,
items?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so items D3 and D6, we will return, well, if the board raises no objection, I would like to take those now since we have Ms. Ray in the audience who spoke to these items. Does anyone object to that?
No.
Okay, so we will begin with item D3. The approval of staff travel, out-of-state travel, and/or expenses in excess of 1,200 dated September 19th, 2011. Ms. Parker?
Well, I pulled D3 and D6, and I pulled them for the same reason, so we may, I think, just look at them both at the same
Okay,
time.
then we will also include item D6, approval of special educational Lindemood Bell staff training materials.
And it was because of the Lindemood Bell training on the one on D3 and plus the materials on D6. And it's a special education question. I've been watching the Lindemood Bell come along on the master plan. And I think what startled me was I didn't expect it to be quite so extensive across the district. And so I'd like just to hear a little bit more about it in general. But I also, one of the things that I was concerned about is that like Ms. Ray, I have had friends who've gone through Lindemood Bell with their children. It's been incredibly successful, one-on-one, incredibly expensive, but very efficacious. The district, however, had Lindemood Bell come in and have a Lindemood Bell training center at Adams in 2003, and then at La Cumbre in 2004 with Lindemood Bell trainers. And unfortunately, I think that there were some individual successes, but as a group, it wasn't successful. And so one of my questions is how is this different? And then the other question is, how will these students be tracked to see if it works this time around, if the materials are different, if the implementation is different in some way? How will the students be tracked?
Well, I'll take a stab at the first couple of them, but we got Dr. Mills there as well. In an analysis of the implementation around the turn of the century, it's kind of fun to say that, huh? At Adams and La Cumbre, it was very apparent that the program was not targeted for special needs students. It was kind of a broad brush approach, and English learner students, in fact, were the targeted students, as well as general education students as well. It was, and while I don't have a complete analysis on that, My understanding is that it was also not implemented with complete fidelity as well. And as Dr. Mills knows, and anyone in cabinet knows that listens to me talk, any program that we're going to do is going to be, we're not going to do it unless we do it with fidelity. Because only with fidelity will we be able to reap the benefits of the program. If we attempt to modify it in some way to meet schedules, to meet time, materials, then we can't get what the research tells us we can get from the implementation. I think a good example of that prior to my arrival, because now the district has practice in implementing with fidelity, is the READ 180 program, which clearly has been implemented with fidelity, and the results have indicated that that implementation has been efficacious. And so I can tell you the tracking will be extraordinarily important for us to ensure that two things. One, that we are implementing it with fidelity, and two, that it's actually getting us the bang for the buck, you know, quote, end quote, that we hope and anticipate it will get us. We'll look at students using their own assessments pre and post, but we will also continue to use the state assessments, our own district assessments, and the school-wide assessments that many schools implement that they use for periodic formative assessments. Those will continue to be used as well. And we'll monitor students' progress. And if we find that students are receiving this as an instructional strategy, as kind of one of the, Ms. Ray used a phrase that I like to use, it's going to be another great tool in the toolbox or the arsenal of tools for our teachers. And if we find that it's not working, that will require us to stop, have a comprehensive team meeting, ask some questions about why it may not be working, and make a change. And we're going to do that all along the way. We're not going to wait to the end of some specified time period. We want to really make sure it's doing what we want to do. One of the issues that has been difficult for both Dr. Mills and myself, quite frankly, has been that we have to travel to attend the training, and that's you know, frustrating, to be very frank. We would have loved to have been able to facilitate the training in our community, in our district, and we made dozens of attempts, each one of us. I talked to the national organization, a board member, and it just seemed that that was a task that we weren't going to get accomplished. And I think for both Dr. Mills and myself, it got to the point where we could either continue to kind of try to engage in negotiations about having it done locally, or just decide that it's an important thing for us to do and let's get started. And that's why it's before you tonight.
Okay, I would ask that if it's possible to get a copy of the analysis from the 2003-2004 era, that maybe we could get that in the board brief.
Yes.
And I'm just hoping that we use it as our own tool, just so we see how it needs to be done differently now, and as a reminder along the way. And then I hope that we'll get reports on this and see how the progress is being made. And with that,
Count on it.
So I actually wanted to follow up.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Luan.
And I think that the word investment was used, which I do feel this is an investment. And it's a big investment. $86,000 is a huge investment. And I think that the message it sends is that this is a priority for us. We need to do what is right. My next question, or my question, is what comes next? I was a little caught off guard with the price tag for this, but what comes next? Is there additional training that is required? Should we as board members expect that this is the first of a series of trainings that our educators are going to need to go through? If either one of you can tell us anything we should anticipate. Thank you.
Okay, is this on? Okay. One of the questions that you asked, Kate, about what is different, as I understand it, when this was in the district in 2003-04, it was Linda Mood Bell clinicians that were actually implementing the program. What is different this time is it's actually our special education teachers, and that I am confident have a much higher level of skill and training and a whole arsenal of strategies. So we are training our teachers. We are, in addition, training our program specialists. So our program specialists are going with the teachers to provide them the support and get the same training In addition, the program specialist will be trained in the assessment packet, which is a separate training. So they will have the assessment tool as well. What we are going to do as a follow-up and to support our staff is we will have this cohort of teachers that are being trained, and they're going to have regular support meetings with our program specialists, where we will have regular meetings set up, kind of web conferencing with Linda Mood Bell, because they can't travel down here. But we have agreed that we will set up our regular web video conferencing with our cohort group, and we will schedule those regularly so that our questions can be answered and that we can continue to implement with fidelity so that we have those things continuing on. As far as an additional class, there is no additional class unless we go into a separate thing, which is math or something in the future, but there is no additional class as far as this.
Thank you. And I do want to make it clear that I do see this as an investment that needs to be made. And I will, as a board member, make a public plea that if anybody from Linda Mood Bell is out there, would consider working with the district to facilitate the training of 35-plus staff here in Santa Barbara. So thank you.
Dr. Mills, when you say there is no additional class, does that mean there is no additional cost? Or are there additional costs that we may see?
All of the costs are now. So
Okay.
we're providing the
Okay.
training, we're providing the assessment tool, we're providing all of the kits, materials, consumables, workbooks, everything that we will need right now with our ARA funds.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Deacon?
And you just mentioned that these are ARA funds, so I just wanted to point that out as well. These are one-time funds that are going away soon, although I guess they extended the deadline to spend these just, I think I read that recently.
September 30th is
Yeah,
my understanding.
yeah.
Is that correct?
I had a couple things. First of all, how many students do you anticipate would be served by this? Will it be all of our special education students?
Well, we are training 1 to 2 teachers per site, which is what we can afford to do. And so we will be able to have this available at every school. So those students that actually need this program would be served by those students, by those teachers.
So the decision will be made on a case-by-case basis? whether
Yes,
they-
always, we always have to follow an IEP.
Yeah, well,
So
this
it
will
would
be an
be, it
IEP
would be
Okay.
based on
Okay.
reading goals.
And I'm assuming that by taking this on ourselves in-house, so to speak, that'll obviate the need for us to spend lots of money, as we have been in the past, on individual IEPs that require Linda Mood Bell training. So that
Right.
it's a one-time investment, but we're going to recoup that farther out because we'll be no longer contracting with them for individual students on a one-on-one basis.
Exactly, yes.
Good. Thank you.
I did have one additional quick question, and that is, Ms. Parker noted that when it was in place at Adams, that it was used, or maybe Dr. Cash noticed, that it was used for English language learners. And obviously, it's not a program that's designed for language acquisition. But does it accommodate special education students who are English language learners?
I think it focuses on the skills, regardless of the English language learner aspect. If you can't read and you don't have the phonics skills, no matter what language, you need to acquire those skills. And so I think it would accommodate those skills, yes. And I did speak with Ms. Keynes,
Okay.
who I guess was the principal at that time. She said that the program was extraordinarily effective at the K-1 level. She was really impressed. She said there were excellent results. She did not see the same results with, I think she said, 4th graders and 6th graders were targeted. And she said there was a variety of students, similar to what Dr. Cash described.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add
Mr. Herron?
a thank you to Dr. Mills and to Dr. Cash. This is a subject and a program that has been asked for a long time, and the fact that we've come together to do it is very gratifying. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to take a vote on these items now?
I will move to approve items D3, the approval of staff travel, and D6, the approval of special ed Linda Mood Bell staff training materials.
Okay, do we have a second?
I will second that.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. So we will move to our action agenda. The first item on our action agenda is, excuse me, the second reading and approval of the board and superintendent protocols. These came before us at our previous meeting. They were developed at a board workshop with the superintendent. And we made some revisions on them from our previous meeting that are reflected in the materials we have here. Do any board members have questions or comments about these?
I'm hoping somebody else wordsmithed it, but it was number 14 is still awkward, so
Oh.
When you asked, I actually,
Good.
I
Yeah,
have
thank
a
you.
recommendation for different wording on that one.
Okay. Do you want to give it to us?
Want me to take a
Ms.
shot
Deacon?
at it? Okay. It was just phrased awkwardly. So how about, understand the superintendent will make personnel recommendations in consultation with the board for staffing at the principal and above level. If you think that captures what we intended to capture.
That captures it for me, and it's certainly better than what we have.
I just have a question, I guess, for Dr. Cash. I mean, the reality is that you make all the personnel recommendations. So I guess I just need still a little bit more clarity that that it's the principals and above that will be in discussion, or that piece is in consultation with the board, but he makes all personnel recommendations. Do you have any suggestions for that, Mrs. Deacon?
Well, we could change the order a little bit. We could say, understand the superintendent will make personnel recommendations, and for staffing at the principal and above level will consult with the board.
Can I suggest some possible wordsmithing? What if we said, understand the superintendent will consult with the board in making personnel recommendations for staffing at principal and above level, or principal level and above?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that,
I can't write that fast, but I can listen to you on the
okay, on the tape?
tape.
Okay. So,
Say that again.
understand that the superintendent will consult with the board in making personnel recommendations at, or for staffing at the principal level and above. Okay, so, Dr. Cash, if you can get that
Can I-
off
can
the
I just
tape.
try it
and
back?
Sure.
Understand the superintendent will consult with the board in making personnel recommendations at the principal level and above.
Or personnel recommendations for staffing at. I think that's part of where we're
Mhm.
stumbling over the wording, and it's, we're
Okay.
we're quibbling a little bit.
Understand the superintendent will consult with the board in making personnel recommendations for staffing at the principal level and above.
Perfect.
Perfect.
There's one just little hyphen missing in number 27 under the superintendent. I would just hyphenate lifelong in lifelong learning.
Okay. The very last item, under superintendent,
27.
27.
Well, 25 if you've gotten rid of the 22 and the 24.
You're right.
Yeah,
In
mine's
in the
25.
final
Yeah.
draft,
Okay.
it's 25.
Okay.
You're right.
Okay. Hey, 2 modifications. I think we're doing well. Then, are we ready for a motion?
I'll move to approve the board and superintendent protocols as amended.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Yay. Okay. Item E2, approval of board action on student discipline case number 11/12-01.
I'm actually going to move to reject the stipulated agreement and recommend a student hearing panel for student discipline case 11/12-01.
Is there a second? Okay. Do we have any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Okay, item E3, approval of annual declaration of need for fully qualified educators and approval of resolution number 2011-2012-18. This is on our revised agenda for those of you who might have received an earlier draft. We added item E3. Ms.
Well,
Peak?
This is one of the things we have to bring before the board every year. It's a declaration of need, and part of why it's been added to the agenda is because the commission will start denying credentials without this. Basically, there are certain credentials that the state no longer issues an emergency credential for, but they still issue emergency CLAD certificates and a few other additional internship permits, short-term staff permits, that type of thing. This document that you have before you allows the commission to issue those for our employees who've not completed their full credentials.
Okay. Board members, any questions, comments?
I would just say, having seen this before and understanding the reasoning behind this quite well now, I will go ahead and move to approve the annual declaration of need for fully qualified educators and approval of resolution number 2011/2012-18.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Item E4, a similar late addition. Approval of annual report of teacher assignments and approval of resolution number 2011/2012-19, annual report of teacher assignments.
This is along the similar lines. There are certain education codes that allow us to have teachers who may not be fully credentialed in a subject area, but have a particular number of units, which allows them to teach that subject area. What you have before you are a list of those teachers, which ed codes they fall under, which courses that they've taken that qualify them. And I will say, any of the teachers that are listed here that are teaching a core subject area also meet NCLB compliance for that subject area.
Thank you, Ms. Peak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I just have a couple really minor typos to correct,
Oh, no
and then
problem.
I would like to make a move. I'd like to move to approve them. Mark Fidel, Mark with a C, and this is the resolution. And then the third paragraph where it says "Now therefore the Board of Education," it just has a loose "and" at the end. The period should end after school
It sure
year.
does. Okay.
So again, seeing these every year. I would like to move, this is at the last page, this is the resolution itself. Mark Fidel, and then the last paragraph, just getting rid of that "and" that's hanging out there. I'd like to move to approve the annual report of teacher assignments for the 2011-12 school year.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our action agenda. We will move on to our conference agenda. Item F1, the presentation from the Santa Barbara Education Foundation. We had a time scheduled for this at 7:25. Does the foundation have you're ready to present now? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we will have our foundation present to the board.
Great, thank you. I'm Margie Yayavi, the Executive Director for Santa Barbara Education Foundation, and I just wanted to talk to you briefly about some of the things that Santa Barbara Education Foundation has done, where we are, and where we want to be. We were established in 1985, And our purpose was to promote the success of students, to ensure a quality education for all students. And we do that through a number of ways. We like to support academic enrichment programs, develop partnerships with the community, and to engage the community and enable a community to participate in public education. And in the early years, we raised money to pay for library materials and technology tools, mini grants. Playground equipment was a big one, and maps and globes. And then in 2003, we started Keep the Beat, and we began to really support music education in the schools. And since that time, we've raised over $500,000 for instruments and teacher salaries. And I wanted to mention Bravo is an after-school program. We just recently received a grant to pay for to fund the teacher, Madalena. She does a fabulous job. She started 3 years ago teaching trombone in Bravo, the after-school program, and she had 3 trombone students. She had 107 last year. I emailed her last week to find out what she's got going on this year. She has 137 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students taking trombone, and a good portion of those are girls. So you can see that Madalena is really enthusiastic. She's incites an excitement for learning for these kids, and we're really happy that Santa Barbara Education Foundation was able to facilitate raising funds for her salary to continue. In the last 6 months, we've raised more than $100,000 in donations in kind and grants that we've received. We are part of, well, let me just mention first the Steinway grand piano. That was really nice. We got a donation that actually Les Rhodes had emailed and asked, and I thought, ha ha ha, that's not going to happen. It did, and it's really nice, and they're very happy with it out at Dos Pueblos. We're also involved in a instrument drive that we do in collaboration with Santa Barbara Bowl, the Granada, Santa Barbara Symphony, and Notes for Notes. We've done two years. We're planning our 3rd one now. This last instrument drive well, what it is the community contributes instruments that they have in their closets that they're not using. So we distribute them throughout the community at a multitude of different organizations, and Santa Barbara School District received 29 instruments this last instrument drive. And they were all in great shape: flutes, violins, oboes, cellos. The only thing we needed was 3 cases. Other than that, they were in great shape, from what I understand from Karen Dutton. And the Santa Barbara Bowl Foundation contributed the money. They purchased the 3 cases that we needed to make them all complete. We've also gotten donations for the violins for the 4th graders, and I think that program is winding down, and hopefully we're raised enough money soon. I don't think we quite have, but we're still working on it to get violins for every 4th grader so that they have classroom set, but they want to take them home, be able to issue a violin to each student, take home to practice. And our Keep the Beat program is supported by local musicians, including Michael McDonald, Jack Johnson, David Crosby, Jeff Bridges, and Maroon 5. Another thing that we do that I find really exciting is that we're fiscal sponsor for some really great community programs: Hippie, Mobile Waterford, Cesar Chavez Leadership Institute, the Academy at Dos Pueblos, Youth Violence Prevention, Bravo, and most recently the Rock Shop Academy. I just want to say one thing about the Academy at Dos Pueblos. I got a call from a foundation on the East Coast, in Chicago actually, and they said they were looking to invest in education west of the Rockies. So they told me what their mission was. It was middle school and high school students and the underserved population. And they were interested in college-bound and just serving underserved populations. And so I told them about Cesar Chavez Leadership Institute, Youth Violence Prevention, and the Academy at Dos Pueblos. And they invited all 3 of them to apply. Youth Violence applied, and the Academy at Dos Pueblos applied. And the Academy made it through. A representative from that foundation is coming on Thursday to do a site visit. So I'm really excited about that. And I wanted to talk really quickly about two of the community programs that I think are really kind of fun. Wait, I think I missed a slide. Go back. Yeah, home instruction for parents of preschool youngsters. That program has been in the school district. It serves, preschool youngsters, their families, and it's been around for many years and been supported by a number of local foundations. It's a very good program. The outreach worker goes to the home and works with the family and teaches them kindergarten games or exercises, learning exercises to help their child become kindergarten ready. And they also work with the parent and kind of train the parent to be involved in their child's education and to be an advocate for their child's education. And then kind of an interesting side effect of that program is that there's a real trust that's formed between the outreach worker and the family. And so subsequently, the outreach worker can help the family with other issues that they may need and direct them to resources that are available to address other issues that the family might be dealing with, like substance abuse or domestic violence or even medical issues that they might not know where to go or how to get help. And then Mobile Waterford, this van is the van. It was donated by Mission Linen and outfitted with 8 computer stations. It drives around to neighborhoods, and it has a regular schedule, 5 days a week. It goes to the same place every day. Everybody knows the families come out, they bring their kids, they come out to the van. It's like a mobile preschool. They actually have like a sitting circle that they do reading. They have books that they can take home. The kids do homework and they feel very proud. But the main objective of it is to teach these children English so that when they begin kindergarten, they are proficient in English. And a cool thing about the program is they have 2 jacks in each computer, so the parents can put headsets on and the kids put headsets on. And the parents inadvertently began to learn English too. And then we have been providing the leadership for several of the ballot campaigns, Measures H and I and Measures Q and R. Measures H and I were passed, all 4 of those measures were passed with over 70% voter approval, which really tells us that we've got a community that strongly supports public education. There were a lot of these similar measures in other districts that didn't pass, so it wasn't a slam dunk, but we made it look like a slam dunk with over 70% voter approval. Measures H and I, H is for the high school, funds math, science, technology, arts and theater, foreign language, and has helped reduce the math size classes. I, the same thing, funding enrichment programs, and passed with, look, almost 72% of voter approval. Most recently, we did Q&R for infrastructure and modernizing our facilities, repairing and upgrading our facilities. Again, passed with over 70% of the voter approval. And Measure R is for elementary schools, provides a $35 million bond to repair and upgrade the elementary schools, and passed by almost 72% voter approval. So with that, what I want to conclude with is to say that this shows us that we have a great community, a caring community, a community that really supports education here. And as an education foundation, I really look forward to working with you, and I feel like that we need a very strong partnership. I look forward to having a stronger partnership with the school district and with the school board. I've looked at other education foundations in the state, and I see that there's a lot that can be done, and I think we've got the community that can help us. I think we can rally the support of the community and help fill in the needs and the gaps that you identify. You work with us and tell us what's your top priorities and what can we do to help. And we've got a great board who's eager to expand and to diversify the things that we're supporting. And so I look forward to working with you. How did I do? Oh, it's not timing me.
You did great. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have any questions or anything?
Board members, are there any questions and or comments? I'd certainly like to thank you for all the work you do on behalf of our students.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I think we probably all share our appreciation for the direct impact you have on our students and the indirect impact you have through your work for all of our ballot measures. But are there other comments that board members would like to make? Ms. Deacon?
Well, as the board liaison to this group, who meets monthly with them and have since almost 3 years now, I have to say I'm really thrilled with how reinvigorated the group feels right now. And Margie, as the new executive director, has brought a lot of initiative, enthusiasm, energy to this job, and I see great strides ahead. I'm really looking forward to the group having a retreat and identifying a large initiative that you want to take on, because I know that's something the group has wanted to do for a long time, and so I look forward to partnering with you on that. And I would just like to say I really appreciate your advocacy in the bond and parcel tax measures,
Thank you.
because that was huge for our district that you folks took that on. And Lynn Rodriguez and Mark Ingalls were co-chairs, I think, of both of those campaigns and put in countless hours, and we've really reaped the benefits of your help. So I would just like to thank you for that. And we do have one public comment also on this item.
Ms. Parker, did you want to comment as well?
Sure. I wanted to say thank you, Ms. Yayavi. And I'm never going to forget your name. But I thanks to you, and thank you so much to your board members. The work that you do is tremendous. One of the things that I'm hoping may help you, because I saw it as an awkwardness in the past when we were two separate districts with a common administration. And I know that obviously with all of our feeder elementaries that may still be a challenge, but I'm hoping that as Santa Barbara Unified, we're actually a little bit easier for you to talk about in the community and outside of the community. I'm so excited to hear that you're looking at other examples from around the state and no doubt around the country. So I hope that helps you, and I'm just looking forward to, as you said, an even closer partnership in the future. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Cash with us. He comes from a district that had a very strong education foundation. So I'm looking to him for guidance and leadership for us too. Thank you.
Ms. Lamone?
And I'm going to echo the thanks that you've received. And I truly believe that there are some projects, some initiatives you've taken on that we would not have been able to accomplish if it wasn't for the Education Foundation and the trust that you've built with the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have one public comment, so we will have our speaker, and then, thank you.
I presume that's me.
That is you, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Lane Wheeler, President of the Santa Barbara Teachers Association, and I would like to echo also the expressions of thanks that we have heard already from the board. The Santa Barbara Teachers Association was very proud to award both Lynn Rodriguez and Mark Ingalls their gold award at a ceremony that we had in the springtime, and because of the end of school and contract and everything, I didn't want to let that opportunity go unremarked upon again. So we do want to thank them. As I told both Lynn and Mark, while we were honoring them individually, we were really honoring the Santa Barbara Education Foundation collectively for all the effort they've done. We so much appreciate the liaison that they've created with our business community and with our community partners. I want to express for every teacher and every certificated unit member out there how much the work that the Education Foundation means to them. It's oftentimes that extra thanks, that extra pat on the back for a job well done, that opportunity to not spend that money that you would normally take out of your own pocket to provide something for your classroom, because the Ed Foundation has stepped in and taken up that responsibility. So they are an unheralded group that needs to be, I think, feted every time we get an opportunity. And on behalf of all of the Santa Barbara Teachers Association, I would like to add my thanks to the work they've done and appreciate so much what they are doing, and looking forward to the goals that they'll be setting in the future. And we look forward to working collectively with you on that. So thank you very much, and thanks for the leadership you provided.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. And I think it's very apropos that the teachers would extend their appreciation as well. Okay, board members, are there any other comments or questions on this item? Oh, okay, well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And we, again, look forward to maintaining a very close relationship. So we will move on to item F2, discussion of proposal for contraband detection and deterrent program services from Interquest Contraband Detection Canines. And Mr. Sumter, I think you are going to present this item to us.
Yes, what this is a proposal by Interquest Contraband Detection Canines to provide a contraband detection deterrent program to the district, which in layman's terms, people call them drug dogs, which would be used to go onto school campuses or school property to do their work, sniff out contraband that may be on campus or residual odors even of that contraband. A couple of the board members attended the demonstration in June, along with our secondary administrators, to observe the dogs at work. Quite impressive, I believe, and it's a sort of a program that Interquest touts as more of a deterrent than a punitive sort of catch the kids kind of a thing. It is something that, at least in my experience, over the last 32 years in education, I've seen quite a bit of benefit from this kind of a program as a deterrent. So much to the point that I've heard administrators question how valid the program is because they never catch anything. They do tend to alert on a lot of residual odor, which is left over from maybe use or that kind of thing, but it has acted very effectively as a deterrent to keep the substances off our campuses, at least in districts I've been in. The program, or this type of program, is already in our policy to use drug dogs at our campuses, so it's not a matter of having to rewrite a policy or write a new policy. It's already there and can just be implemented. The proposal that you have in front of you is one that we're getting a little bit of a late start on, so that it would be a 9-month program versus what we would normally look at as a 10-month program if we were to start it in September. So we're really looking for some direction from the board right now on what you would like to do to consider the proposal, or what direction you'd like us to take with this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sumter. Do board members have questions or comments about this? I believe it was Mrs. Deacon and I who attended the presentation in June, which was quite interesting, but we didn't have any discussion either with each other or here at the board really about that. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Herron?
Yes, I'm just curious, in your experience, what is the general response from the community in this kind of an effort? I mean, is it 100% fantastic? Is it
I've never received a negative response from the community over the program. And it's actually to the contrary, it's been very supportive and positive, realizing that it is an issue, not just in the schools, but in the community at large, but the way it affects our students at school. The community and parents particularly have expressed appreciation for this kind of a program, in my experience.
And the students also?
Yeah, yes, the students, they learn the ropes, so to speak, in terms of they know that this is a program we have in the district, and like the idea that it's keeping it off, the contraband off our campuses. Occasionally, some kids still push the envelope and they get caught, but the majority of the effectiveness of this program is a deterrent, and it is appreciated by anybody I've ever talked to about it.
Thank you.
Ms. Barker?
Okay. I guess I have some questions on the specifics about how it would be implemented. They come in twice a month, as I recall, 2 half-days a month, is that correct?
Right, it's contracted for 3 full days, but they split it. So
How do they decide, like, which rooms to go through?
that's an administrative decision at the site when they show up. They're random visits, so they don't know when they're coming. The company asks for a calendar from each of the school sites on which days they would like them to not come to the school, such as testing weeks and those kinds of things, so that they don't interrupt some key time for classrooms. But the site administrator will select classrooms or locations. It doesn't have to always be a classroom. It could be a parking lot. It could be lockers, if they don't want them to go into classrooms on a certain day.
Mm-hmm. And what have our high school administrators said about this, or have you?
Very supportive.
They're very supportive of it?
Yes.
Has there been any conversation with some of the nearby, I see that Bishop Diego uses them, and Ojai uses them as well. it says Providence, but I'm not sure that's our Providence. It seems like a very small school to be using drug-sniffing dogs. But I'm just wondering if there have been any conversations with some of our nearby districts and how their community felt about it, and if they felt that it's been successful.
I did not communicate with them. I was kind of relying on my own experience, having worked with this company as well as another company that's the two largest companies that do this in California. My experience has been positive with both of them, so I didn't take the time to call. Dr. Cash, one of his previous districts, Claremont, uses this company as well.
And maybe
So-
Dr. Cash, you could talk about your experience with it.
Sure. It was interesting hearing Mr. Herron's comment about students. My son was a high school student when Interquest canine dogs came to Claremont High School, where I was the superintendent. And it was very clear to him and all of his student friends that it was a very strong deterrent. It was interesting to hear him comment about the experience of being in a classroom. I asked him, what was the disruption like? How long did it take? Did it really make a big difference in what was happening in the classroom? What classrooms did they go into? I asked him all of those kind of inquisitive parent-like questions. And it was, as Mr. Sumter was completely, the days it came was completely unknown to anyone. And at Claremont High School, what I found appropriate and what we've talked to our administrators about is that they made it very clear that no classrooms were targeted. My son was mostly at that particular time taking AP classrooms and had drug dogs. See, I wondered if they always went to his room for a reason. But every time they were on campus, one of his classes was visited by one of the canines. I would say my experience from parents is that there were some parents who were nervous about it, very frankly. There were some parents that didn't like it, didn't want this to happen. But my experience in Claremont was that probably the overwhelming majority, 80% to 90%, were in favor of it, especially when they heard of how really unobtrusive the detection was. And the data is pretty unnervingly positive, quite frankly. And I mean unnerving from the sense that it actually does deter kids from bringing things on campus, both objective and anecdotally, because my son would tell me, nobody brings that to school anymore because they're afraid they're going to get busted.
Thank you.
Ms. Lamone?
I would actually like to hear your take, Ms. Deacon and Ms. Cordero, because you did attend the workshop, what you thought of the workshop, what you saw, maybe also, we're speaking so favorably about this, but also if there was anything that you might question about it.
Well, there were a couple of things. One is that this had come up previously, about 3 or 4 years ago. One of the athletic directors from one of our local high schools had a group of student athletes who were actually advocating for either drug testing or something along the lines of the drug dogs. And one of the arguments that they had was that they felt it gave them more, sort of almost permission among their peers to refuse to engage in drug use, because they could use the excuse that they were concerned they might get detected by the dogs, and that they felt they were more easily able to decline. I have to say I was fairly skeptical, and to a certain extent still am, because I tend not to, want to over regulate our schools beyond what I think we need to just for safety. I was impressed at how unintrusive it is, and that the students are not in the room while this is going on. The students are asked to get up and leave their backpacks and their jackets at their desks, and then the students leave the room, so that if anything is detected, the students are not aware of whose it was, and it's reported to the contact person, and it's not viewed by the whole class, which I thought was, I very much appreciated that, because it would mean that the students' anonymity was protected, at least until the time when anything formal might take place. The one issue that did come up, which I thought is something, but of an unintended consequence, was the concern that employees are sometimes identified. And that poses another issue for the board and for administrators in terms of how to deal with that when that happens. And again, the service typically doesn't do anything about it. They simply report the information. So it's up to the district to decide how we would want to handle that.
The program is designed really to address the issue of student use, not anything that the staff may be involved in. And it is agreed upon that the focus would be on the student areas of the campus, the desks, the student desks, student parking lot, student lockers. It is not something that would be purposely engaged in to use on staff. In fact, would be recommended not to.
Ms. Deacon?
I have a couple of things I want to say, but first of all, I actually came away from the demonstration with the impression that if the dog alerted on a teacher desk, that the district would pursue that. I mean, personally, I would want that to happen if there was a teacher who had brought an illicit drug to campus. I think we should know that. So I'm not so sure that I would necessarily take them out of the equation. I think what's really key, not only for the students, but the teachers as well, is information about this program, the initiation of the program. And we haven't really talked about that yet, although it did come out a bit at the demonstration about how we're going to communicate to the public if we approve this, that this is a new program we're initiating. We want parents to know, we want students to know, because we want that deterrent effect to start immediately, not when the first dog arrives. And by the way, these dogs, well, there was just one, I guess, was this really mellow yellow lab that was not imposing, not scary, alerts by sitting down next to the backpack. That's how they alert. And they're rewarded with a toy, not food, because if you gave them a treat, then they'd start alerting on all the food and all the backpacks. So it seems like they've thought it through really well. The individuals seem very professional. So my main concern would be the communication piece ahead of time, and then the protocols that we would implement so that the assistant superintendents or whoever accompanies the in-request folks through their visits, we're doing this the same at every school, and that the process by which the students, if something is found, that those students are then taken to the office, whether it's after class and other students don't see it. But I think that needs to be key, because I remember the InterQuest people said, we can either open and search the backpack at that time, or your own staff can do that. And I got the impression that our principals wanted to do that themselves, because they already do that and they already know how to do it. But I want to make sure if we approve this that it's universally implemented in the same way.
I can share that the majority, and I can't really give you a percentage, but I would say it's a vast majority of alerts that these dogs did have were on residual odors. It could be days, over a weekend at a party, and somebody spills alcohol on a backpack or something, and it comes to school, and the dog will alert on it on Monday. It was rare that we actually found substances, that the team actually found substances at the schools I've been at. I think that was evidence of the strong deterrent that it created. And either kids weren't bringing it, or they were disposing of it rather quickly when they saw the dog. So in terms of the process, quite typically I've been told by the handlers that they feel they need to address it as far as getting the administration involved in the situation at the point of alert, not delaying it too long because of any thing that could happen between the time they left the room and the student was brought to the office. So typically the student and their belongings were brought to the office when the alert was made.
Ms. Lamone?
So there are a few things that come to mind. One, that there's still an unknown about what would happen if the dog sat next to an item that belonged to an adult in the room and not one of our students. And I think that I would like to know what would happen. I don't, on one end, I mean, I'm hearing it's not recommended. On the other end, if the dog sits next to something, how do you ignore it? But that would be a piece that would be very important for me to know before we get into the situation versus trying to figure out an answer when the situation occurs. Hopefully it would never occur, but if it were to occur. The second piece is also the human element in this. I hear that the days are random, but the classrooms can be suggested by the administrator. And so if this were something that were to happen in our district, I would absolutely want our district message to be that this should be random. And that, I don't believe, should be negotiated. That no one class should be targeted more than the other. And truthfully, the human piece is probably the piece that I'm more worried about than the wonderful lab. And then I think another bit of information that would be useful for me is to know what others besides administrators think. So someone that comes to mind is what our youth coordinator, Ismael Huerta, who works so much with our students. What do others think about something like this? I have heard in our 10-minute discussion that this deters. So in some ways, this is all that is a deterrent. We're not actually addressing the root cause of the problem. We are not helping our students stop using. One of the examples that was given is they can party over the weekend and then they come to school. And so I want to make sure that our approach is an approach where we absolutely take responsibility for making our schools safe, because I do believe that that is our responsibility as a district and as board members, but that also this is not standalone, that we think about comprehensively what are we doing to help students stop using drugs, because this just means, truthfully, for the high schools, if you're off campus for lunch and after school, you have the green light. It's just the 8 hours that you're on campus, you're not supposed to do this. And so to me, putting a Band-Aid is helpful because a Band-Aid is needed now, but we still have a problem. Our students are still using. And I would like to see initiatives come to us that are twofold, that help us solve the immediate issue at their schools, but that also address the root cause of the problem. So those are just some comments, some feedback on what I'm thinking about this particular item. Thank you.
Okay, and I have a comment that's really kind of outside maybe the issue a little bit, and it has to do with the company itself. Because in looking at their profile, I noted that all of their handlers are male. I don't know what that means about them, but I certainly do not want to contract with a company that at least de facto seems to preclude women. So I'm not sure how we handle that. That's a totally separate issue than whether this is a good idea or not. But it is something that I would like to have some more information about if we were going to be pursuing this. But I also share Ms. Lamone's concern, and I would go further than to say we have to give the strong message that the classroom should be random. I think we need to implement policy that says the classroom will be random. So, Ms. Parker?
And I can't remember, Mr. Sumter, what our board policy says about having the dogs on campus, if it already says that those will be random searches.
I believe the word random is in the policy.
Okay,
yes.
because that would be great. If it's in there, obviously we'll follow the policy.
Right.
And I just want to chime in and say I really appreciate what both Ms. Limon and Mrs. Cordero has said in terms of it being just one tool in the arsenal. But I do think it's an important tool. We see the suspensions and expulsions coming through with drugs and alcohol on campus. and we get the parent complaints about drug dealing going on campus. And if we can get that piece to stop, it would just be tremendous for student safety. I do think it's important to go forward with this, and it sounds to me like we should maybe look at more than one company. I don't know if the other company works in this area.
I did check with the other company. It was actually the one that I was connected with in my previous district. It is kind of a Northern California, Southern California situation.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I'm not so sure that the other company would be able or willing to travel down to Southern California in this area to service.
Thank you.
Ms. Deegan?
Can I just speak to the deterrent piece one more time? Because I do think this is one step, and it's clearly not the whole picture, and it's a small piece. But I think what Mrs. Cordero was saying earlier about it gives students the permission to not engage if they feel pressure on it. And I know I spoke to some parents last year at a back-to-school night, and I was really feeling bad because their daughter was a 9th grader who said she'd been approached to buy marijuana on campus as a 9th grader, and she didn't know what to do, and she was frightened. And I feel like those students who might not want to do drugs at all are still impacted by the presence of drugs on campus. So we're benefiting them as well as at least moving it out of school. And we know they're not going to necessarily stop doing drugs because of this, but it's a step. It's a small step. And so I would support doing this. And I totally agree about the random searches. We're not targeting any groups of students here. I think they're equal opportunity users, and we see drug use at all levels across our campuses.
I might add that, kind of lost my thought there in the middle of my sentence. We had nearly 300 incidents last year in Santa Barbara school districts that were drug or substance abuse related. Well, not necessarily abuse, but it could have been drug paraphernalia or possession under the influence or sales. And if we can deter, even half of those through this program, I think we would be providing a great service to our families. Even on the passive alerts that are on residual odor, that will at least provide an avenue for the administrator or staff to communicate with the parents of that student that there was an alert there, and were you aware of this situation over the weekend or overnight, or can get some communication going and what kind of connections the school site can do with the family to provide that extra help, and not just the one program that we're looking at here.
Well,
I was going to comment that
Dr.
you
Cash?
might not see as many school districts as you would anticipate, because many districts contract with local law enforcement to provide this service in their schools. And so it's a dramatically different approach to canine detection when as a district, you've contracted with law enforcement, as opposed to a private agency who works at the direction of the school district. So I as a superintendent, was involved in both of those. One in Clovis with the police department was who we contracted with, and then obviously in Claremont with the private agency. And I would hope that in the pursuit of randomness, which I think is fantastic, that wouldn't eliminate the opportunity for administrators to target areas on the campus, such as parking lots, which would not be random, but would be, I believe, a necessary place if we were to conduct searches.
One of the benefits, or I don't know if I want to call it a benefit, but one of the options in this kind of a program too is, since it's divided evenly over the course of the year, it does provide an opportunity to reserve those visits in the last month or so for special activities that you wish to engage them in. So there's some upon request type visits that you can use the companies for as well.
Mr. Herron?
Yes, can you talk a little bit about how far this program has gotten into our system? Have all the principals, vice principals, counselors, staff, PTAs, what degree of infiltration into our community have you gotten on this?
Right now, the communication has really been with the principals at the high school level and board members that were at the demonstration. That's as far as it's gone so far, but as far as implementation of the program, then you also obviously have to get the word out there, as well as the company visiting the schools and providing demonstrations at the schools, so the students and parents who are wishing to attend those demonstrations can view what the program is like. But
I guess I'm more concerned with the more information in advance of making the decision, the more welcome it might be once the decision is made, rather than making it and then go out and tell everybody we're doing it. So I think if we're going to come back in 2 weeks to approve this, that a little bit of outreach, to me, would be ordered. I'd rather see a group of people here either condoning it or talking against it. But I'd rather see that before the event and not after the event.
I guess
Right, and-
that's the kind of direction we're looking for from the
Well, I
board
was just going to
tonight.
say, I think that the direction that I'm hearing from the board is that there's interest on the board for getting additional information and pursuing it to bring it back. But I would say to bring it back to approve is a little premature, because I will say I am not 100% sold on it. So I am very unsure whether I would be supportive or not. And I think there would be some of the answers that we would get to some of our questions would probably influence my decision and maybe the decision of others. But I certainly think it's worth bringing it back, finding out more information, bringing it back as a proposal so that we can have that discussion. And I agree with Mr. Herron that making sure that many of the stakeholder groups in the community are aware of it so that they can participate in our discussion and in our negotiations. Because one of the things I would like to see is if we do go down this path and we do decide to contract with whether it's this company or another, that we would have a policy in place before the implementation begins on exactly what's going to happen. And so I think it's in the development of that policy that stakeholder input would be extremely important. And that should be happening very soon. So hopefully we're giving you enough direction that you can bring it back to us and understand sort of what the desire of the board is.
Yeah, and I don't know if BP 5145.12 spells out as much as you're asking for, but there is some specific information on how it plays out currently, but it sounds like you're asking for some more specifics
I
on
think
what's
we're
there.
asking for, if we were to utilize drug dogs, that we would want a very specific policy on how that will be conducted and what will happen, what will be the, for lack of a better word, I guess, chain of command for the information. And for example, in the event that a staff person is identified, what will be the result of that? Just a variety of contingencies that we need to be prepared for, I think. And we do have public comment, but Ms. Lamone, you want?
And I just also wanted to add, in the 2 weeks, I really appreciate Mr. Herron's comments, but if there could be outreach, actually, if we can let our constituent groups, our PTAs, PTSAs, our DLACs, ELAC group parent know about this, I would appreciate it. I agree. I would rather see input before this is implemented than once it's implemented. And the second very specific thing that I would like to see, Dr. Cash, is probably any specific areas you feel or recommendations for. You mentioned the parking lot, so we don't really have lockers, but parking lots and anything else. Again, for me, this going into something like this, I don't want gray. And I think you always get gray anyway. So if we can prevent all of the gray areas, and if there could be recommendations from the district staff on what areas we might not want to consider random, what we would do if an employee, those would be very helpful for me. Thank you.
Okay, public comment?
Lane Wheeler.
Thank you, Lane Wheeler, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Couple of things that come to mind. I think this raises a number of questions already, many of which you've identified. But the term of the contract, certainly, having spent as much time with Mr. Smith as I have in negotiations, is one that pops up. It's called out as a 9-month contract, but school got out on June 2nd this last year, and I think it's June maybe 6th or 7th this year, 6th. That's a very short month if you're going to use them as a monthly basis. And at $1,230 a month, I think every time we can save $1,200, we need to do it. It sort of also begets the question of a startup date. If that's really closer to a November 1 startup by the time this is brought back and policies developed, I think this needs to really reflect what the total cost is. I remember when we were sitting here looking for a superintendent, and I did a quick Google search on the companies. I found some very interesting things. I have not gotten on my computer to do a Google search on this company, but certainly strikes me as something that might need to be done. Obviously, there's information that needs to come out on this policy, startup information particularly, so that our students know what their rights are and our employees know what their rights are. I would certainly strongly encourage you to look at due process protection for your employees. I think the question of staff involvement is also paramount to this discussion as to what's going to be required. We constantly, I think, with the Common Core discussion, have been talking about what's going to come off of teachers' plates if we're going to be adding all these additional responsibilities on. If all of a sudden you're in the middle of a lesson and the dog comes in and you are asked to have your students stand up and go outside for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm wondering what's going to happen to instruction at that period of time with no proviso for, oh, don't worry about that one day, we'll get back on track somehow. So I think that's a piece that needs to be thought out. I wonder if there's any legal issues involved in this, and I would certainly ask the board to possibly consult our legal consultants to find out if there are any issues that we need to be considering. Also, the duration of this, right now, it looks to be about possibly a 7-month project. Is this looking at long-term? Is it going to be $11,000, $12,000, $13,000 a year? Is there an accelerator in that clause? Once again, you've already identified there's numbers of questions. I think anytime employees might fall under this gun, we certainly want to be well aware and have our opinions valued when it comes to this process. So I would encourage you to think about all those aspects of it, and particularly the money aspect. And I'm sure I'll be talking about this again in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Okay, if there's no further comments or questions from the board, then we will move on. And we will look forward to hearing on this topic again in a couple of weeks. So F3, the first reading of revisions to Board Policy 2210, administrative discretion regarding board policy. And Mr. Smith, this is your item.
Thank you. I'm not sure why they call it that. Really, when you dig deep into this, what it really talks about is Tier 3 categorical flexibility. And what the revision to 2210 does is that in 8-9, when we got categorical flexibility under the Tier 3 provision, we got it through 13-14. In the course of budget negotiations at the state level, that was extended to 14-15 this year. This revision to the policy actually eliminates any specific reference to date. So in the event that flexibility goes on in perpetuity, the board wouldn't have to go back and revise the policy. And that's all it does, which I'm kind of hoping flexibility does, because otherwise, if we have to turn the clock back, you've already heard me talk about the woe that'll cause. So that's what this one does.
Okay, so this is to sunshine this item.
Yeah.
Mr. Herron?
I would move that we waive the second reading and approve the revisions to Board Policy 2210.
Second?
Okay. Any further discussion? Oh, Mr. Wheeler, you want to speak on this item?
This is your last time.
Thank you for the consideration. In looking through this, I missed a couple of pieces, but I do want to remind the board that I see certainly peer assisted review, which is a contractual obligation that the board has. So I would just encourage you to make sure, as you maybe include a proviso in here, that if something is called out specifically in contract, that it be not subject to arbitrary decision about expenditure of categoricals, and that those be honored so that we avoid issues as we move forward. Just a thought. Thank you.
Not that any consideration of expenditures is arbitrary, but
I mean, frankly, I don't think that's necessary because I think the contract supersedes relative to whether it's unrestricted or restricted. So I think the point's well made, but I don't think it needs to be done personally.
Okay, so it'll be in effect even if it's not in the language?
That's right, because we have
Okay.
to adhere to the contract.
Okay, okay. Okay, then we have the motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. Item F4, first reading of the revision to Board Policy 7310, naming of facility.
This policy's been revised to provide that there should be a written agreement anytime we enter into a naming opportunity. It also expands the number of opportunities relative to what the board can name in terms of landmarks and things of that nature. The board might have additional comments with respect to what our historical practice has been or whether some of these things are things we want to entertain in the future, and so we're looking for feedback at this point.
Ms. Deacon?
I just wanted to raise one point, and I'm not sure that I would want to specify a dollar amount, but it seems to me we have kind of a de facto threshold of about 500,000 for a naming opportunity. And I'm wondering, I guess I'd like to hear from my fellow board members as well as you, Mr. Smith, about whether that's something that is in place even though we haven't called it out specifically.
I think there's a couple of things. Naming opportunities with respect to buildings or something that's substantial, we've usually used the threshold of 500,000. If you look at this policy where it talks about trees and things of that nature, I don't think you're going to get anybody to cop up $500,000 for a tree. So I mean, if we're going to include something like that, I think it needs to be specific with respect to a building or something like that. If you even want to leave this language in here about the smaller items. I mean, obviously this is CSBA recommended. We don't have to go with that. We could whittle this thing down and only go with things that we think, you know, could command that level of contribution. I mean, that's why we're here, is we need the feedback from the board.
Ms. Parker?
I'm fine with it being in there since it just clarifies that it's possible to name a tree. But and I actually don't think I would want to have the amount specified for anything, just because on a case-by-case basis, I want it to be able to be a negotiation and not somebody saying, here's your board policy, and this is the amount that we're going to donate, when, in fact, in certain cases, they may be able to have, you know, that be for a room and something else be for a building, that kind of thing. So I think I would trust a future board to be able to judge whether or not it was an appropriate amount.
I will say the thing I think that is good in this policy is the fact that it requires a written agreement, because I think when you deal with some of these large donations and there's other things attached, that's easily lost in the translation unless it's put into writing. I can think of one most recently that we had a tough time tying it down because the money came and we had conceptual agreements and we always had to go back and look at, you know, our notes, but I don't believe anything formal in terms of, you know, an agreement came to the board, and I think that puts the board and everybody else in a better position.
I had a concern as well. In the very last item, under naming rights and number 4, where it allows that the written agreement will prohibit any message, image, et cetera. I wanted to include language that would prohibit the use of Native Americans as mascots, images, names, et cetera. And I don't know whether we want to do that specifically, identifying Native Americans, or I said something like, where it says, encourages unlawful discrimination against any person or group, or includes names, words, or images denoting particular ethnic or racial groups. We could say offensive names, words, or images, but that always gets into the question of who deems it offensive. And I would prefer to just say we're not going to use names that are relative to racial and ethnic groups. At any rate, I would like, we can negotiate the language, but I'm wondering how the board feels about including that concept. Ms. Parker?
Here's a question. What if the Chumash tribe wanted to come and make a large donation and name a building the, you know, the Chumash whatever? How would that fit in?
Well, I actually see your point. And I thought about trying to word it, and I wasn't, and I didn't do it because I couldn't figure exactly how to word it this way. I thought about adding language like unless determined by that particular group. You know, so I don't know exactly, but I think you're right. I think if you know if we wanted to have like the Chumash, like in Carpinteria where they have the Tomel Park, that would be appropriate.
Because I completely agree with you on concepts, but I do think that that's gonna be important how that's worded if you want to work on that for
can we?
You're really kind
second
of looking at derogatory reference, kind of, or and all
Or
those things
language
get into
sensitive.
subjective, just like when you said offensive.
Yeah.
I mean, who deems it offensive?
Yeah, well, or terms that are used with, that are not the people themselves placing it there. It's another group that's calling it that name.
I should probably point out that even if we arrive at something, look at how 5 is joined with 4. So future boards would have to make that determination whether something occurred that was compliant or non-compliant, and then effectively pull the trigger.
Yeah.
And I think that's the more difficult issue to grapple with.
You may be right, but I'm happy to work with Mr. Smith on this if the board feels inclined to. Okay, great.
Okay,
Agreed.
great.
Thank you. Okay.
A question I have, by changing the policy, it's presumed there's a written contract that says, one of the items was this will end in 15 years, or this one in 5 years, or this will end in 20 years, the naming rights. But there's nothing in here that would deal with us renaming something that happened 50 years ago or 30 years ago. Whereas we're deleting a sentence, the very last sentence of the previous policy that says the renaming of existing school buildings, parts of buildings, athletic facilities, or areas shall occur only under extraordinary circumstances and after thorough study. At least it gives us the right to, in the past, stop something. And so I think we're giving up that right. But what if we decided we wanted to change something that was named, 30 years ago? There's nothing in the policy that's changed that would allow us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I did not see that, and I think that should be carried forward. I mean, I could think of, a situation, I can think of a perfect example in Paso Robles when Flamson Middle School collapsed in the Loma Prieta quake. They ended up renaming it Flamson, but they didn't have to, and if there was, some compelling reason to name it something else, they could have at that, because it was completely leveled. So I'll make that notation and we'll move it forward. The renaming.
Thank you, Mr. Herron, for catching that for us. Okay, so we will come back to this item. Item F5, first reading of board policies, administrative regulation in the 3000 series. So, we will just, I guess, go through these. Do board members want to identify any area? Why don't we just do that? Do board members want to identify any areas of concern? We started with BP 3100. Ms. Parker?
This was just a quick question for Mr. Smith. 3100, wow, a lot of new detail added.
Yeah, GASB 54.
Okay, so I just wanted to, that one didn't have an explanatory note on why that was happening?
Yeah, and actually, Meg has worked with our auditors, and you're going to hear this during the audit, how we have to identify fund balances, and you can see, it gets to a very specific level of detail. I'm not going to go through all these because I think we'll have another opportunity to do that, but thank you, Governmental Accounting Standards Board.
Okay, thank you. That was my question on that one.
Okay.
Which incidentally is not a governmental agency, but prescribes, regulations that we have to follow.
Mr. Herron?
In reading this, I sort of get the impression you have your choice of which one you want.
Yes.
Are we putting both in just so you can choose which one you want?
I think we'll have to look at that. I don't know off the top of my head. But I can give you a couple of examples. When I read through this, I was making notes. When you look at like non-expendable fund balance, when you look in our general fund, you see components of the ending fund balance and stores, which is warehouse. Well, warehouse stores are not liquid, so you can't expense them, but they form a component of the ending balance. There's a perfect example. Restricted fund balances are not only restricted relative to restricted funds, it could be quasi-restricted in the sense that, our parcel tax ending balances show up as unrestricted, but they're restricted due to the covenant with the community and the parcel tax language. Same thing with local donations, which show up generally on the unrestricted side, but usually have some kind of prescribed restriction when the board receipts them. I could go on and on, but that's the kind of thing we're dealing with.
But as far as committed versus assigned, the reading of it says a school district doesn't need both.
That's correct, and I don't think we'll be bringing both forward, one or the other. I guess I didn't make myself clear.
Okay, so do board members have any revisions suggested for 3100? Okay, so then any revisions that you would, or questions on 3280?
I just had one interesting question, and I got a very good answer to it, but under the, on page 27, the resolution of intention to sell or lease, in reading that, I thought of the listening agreement we just signed with Parma School, which wasn't this process at all. But the answer I got, maybe Mr. Smith could go on it, was that because we are maintaining the basement for storage, that puts it in different classification.
It's the joint occupancy provision, and that's actually on page 28, where it says lease of real property with joint occupancy. And if you recall, when we leased a portion of this building to Antioch, we also didn't have to do the protocol because of joint occupancy allows us to go around that.
Thank you.
Okay, 3290?
I actually,
Ms. Limon, sorry.
Clarification. I see that on page 31, number 4 says that the board shall ensure that the acceptance of the gift, grant, or bequest does not imply endorsement of any business. I turn to the next page, and then on 32, I read, the sponsorship shall contain, and when you're talking about promoting and allowing for brochures and so forth, I'm actually confused. I don't know if, in some ways, it seems that that's an implicit way of supporting someone as far as allowing them to have their material there. So I just needed clarification because on one page it says the business, the corporation can't promote their business, but if they're handing out flyers and goodies, it seems like, and I'm making up the flyers and goodies, I don't know what else they would, but it seems that that could be perceived.
Yeah, the way I see, unless there's some contradictory language, the way I see 31 is there is no explicit sponsorship, but so that's when you receive donations, gifts for specific schools, as opposed to on the other side where you're explicitly stating that there's going to be a corporate sponsorship and you're well aware of that. That's the way I see it.
Right, I saw that as the distinction between receiving a gift and actually entering into an agreement.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's the way I see it too.
Thank you for the
Okay.
clarification.
Any, Ms. Deacon, you had a,
I did. My point has to do with what I know, in fact, we're already doing, and I'm wondering if that practice falls under this policy, because you can go to pretty much any one of our gyms and see a banner for some local business. You go to a football game, and in the program, you're going to find advertising there, which I support all of those things. I think that's good money that comes into the schools. But I'm not sure whether this policy, as I'm reading it now, would make us reconsider the level to which we have to interact with those individuals, because it says every sponsorship agreement shall be in writing and shall be approved by the board. Now, if I spend $150 for my electrical company and I want a banner in a gymnasium, am I going to have to negotiate a contract and have that be approved by the board?
I would think in most cases those are coming from auxiliary organizations like ASBs, so I'm not even sure they're flowing through us, to tell you the truth.
I think you're right. I think they go to booster organizations and they go
unless the
straight
board
into
wants
ASB.
to increase the envelope to deal with all that, I would just leave it alone.
No. Okay, so
I think
what
we're
we're
okay.
describing does not fall under the purview of this. Okay, that was my question.
Can I
Okay.
ask
Oh,
on that,
Ms.
just
Parker?
to make that really clear, should it say every, like, district level sponsorship agreement shall be in writing and shall be approved by the board?
We could do, where is that at?
Well,
But again, there might be something huge that a school site wants to do, so I just feel like that's a little ambiguous and could get us into trouble, so that's one that I would like some more thinking on.
well, I assumed that that paragraph was referring to the paragraph above it, where it says the board may enter into an agreement or arrangement with an outside entity for blah, 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 blah.
That's the way I read it.
And then it says every sponsorship agreement. I was reading it to mean every sponsorship agreement that the board has chosen to enter into.
But then in the first paragraph, I guess, where my question would be, if the board has the right, are we specifically saying it's only the board that has the right? Or is it still allowed that ASBs and so forth do it?
Well, I think there's an order of magnitude here, and there's a couple of examples. When we talk about banners and things of that, I mean, that's a little bit different than, let's say, us trademarking a high school's logo or our own logo and selling it community-wide. I mean, that's kind of, I'm looking at order of magnitude, and I think that's what we need to look at, what's going to be systemic across the district and significant, as opposed to, I'm not sure we're really concerned about, what the boosters or the ASBs do in terms
So,
of.
Mr. Smith, could we ask you to maybe take a look at that language and see if you could try to clarify it,
Okay.
if it's possible to make it more sort of obviously refer to just these larger agreements.
Okay.
Could I make a comment?
Sure.
The
Dr.
first paragraph
Cash.
says the board may
Mhm.
enter into
Right.
an agreement. And then the rest of it, I'll just put on my lawyer hat, I read as any agreement the board enters into is subject to these conditions. So any agreement the board has not entered into in relationship to corporate sponsorship are not necessarily subject to these conditions. So it's, the way I look at it is, when there's a deliberate act to enter into a sponsorship agreement, then the board holds itself to these rules and procedures in relationship to it.
And could I just ask that at some point, that's communicated to staff, because one of my concerns is sometimes the word gets rolling and people misinterpret things and suddenly think that they have to do something that in fact they don't have to
Very
do.
true.
And, we've seen all kinds of fallout in those terms. So that would be my biggest concern.
I'm more concerned about the flip side, when people have, at the sites doing things without asking us first, but.
Yes, I'm sure we
we've
have.
had that naming thing.
We have enough
on more
examples of
than one
both,
occasion.
probably.
Yes.
Okay, so, Mr. Smith, whatever,
I'll work on
whatever you
something.
can do, and if it's clear enough the way it is, I must confess, I did not read it as unclear, but if other people did, it might be worth adding something to it. Okay, 3550? No? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, the BP 3550, AR 3550? Nope. Oh, yes?
I'm sorry. I think there's just a small typo on page 37, unless there's a term here I'm unfamiliar with. But on number 2, it says, not be deep fried, par fried. And I was wondering if that's pan fried.
I think it's pan fried.
I don't know, par fried, because you can parboil.
You can parboil.
Okay, so, well, like I
find out.
said, maybe I should have looked
But
it
I
up,
don't think
Par
par
fried
fried.
definition. It's a cooking technique, sometimes also known as blanching.
But why would we not want par fried?
Because you use oil.
Oh, you do use
Oil.
oil,
Should reach a
okay.
depth of no less than 3 inches.
Then
Oh,
I
okay.
think that's
Okay.
correct.
I have learned something,
Okay.
and I appreciate that.
So par fried, okay. Or flash fried.
Usually we only get that when we exceed about 11 o'clock midnight.
That's true. Okay. BP 3551,
I did have a question on that one for Mr. Smith.
3551?
3551. On meal sales, I read through all the meal sales and places the money goes and all that. How does catering fit in with our board policies?
Well, a la carte sales, other than the fact that we have to use those dollars in the cafeteria fund, we don't have the same kind of regulations, I guess, what are you asking?
Well, I guess, is catering considered à la carte?
Yes.
Is anything that's after
Catering
school
is
hours?
à la carte.
À la carte.
That's correct.
Money goes into the cafeteria fund, but it doesn't fit into any of these things, so we don't need to worry about that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, mostly what you're looking at is regulations from the National School and Breakfast and Lunch Program and how it actually folds into code and policy.
okay. AR 3551? Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
BP
on page-
35?
On page 39, just a minor question. It says that the board is supposed to approve all meal prices based on cost of providing food services and consistent. Do we ever approve meal prices? We do?
we
You
do.
approve
Yes, we do.
meal increases, and we don't do it on an annual basis, but if there's an increase in meals, we bring it here and you approve it, and that has happened in the last 4 years.
Yes.
Well, this just says, okay, meal prices, okay. Thank you.
Okay, AR 3551? Nope, okay. BP 3553? Nope, okay. AR 3553? Hey, we got through these. Okay, so we will come back to those. Do we want to act on any of these tonight? Mr. Herron?
I would like to waive the second reading and approve BP 3551, AR 3551, BP 3553,
And
AR 3553. Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on those?
For clarification, can you tell me which ones are left, just so I make sure I have them? I know
It would-
every-
Everything other than food services.
Okay.
Well, we were not, you didn't take 3550 and BP 3550 and AR 3550, so it would include those. Those are left,
Okay.
Just 51 and 53.
Yeah.
Both BP and AR
Okay.
are up
Yeah.
for vote.
yeah, so we're only voting on those.
Did you mean to include
I-
BP
I meant-
3550 and 35?
Yeah, I meant to approve everything that was food service related.
Oh,
So would you
I
amend
will-
your motion to?
I'll amend my motion to that, yes, that was my intent.
And I will second the amended motion.
okay. Okay, and then we'll clarify again for you, Mr. Smith, what's not included here. Okay, so any further discussion on these? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Motion carries 5-0. So, Mr. Smith, the ones we did not include were BP 3100, BP 3280, and BP 3290. Those are the three that are left
Okay.
to review. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. We completed the consent agenda earlier, so that brings us to coming events. Are there any coming events that board members would like to identify? Ms. Deacon already identified one for us, very helpful. Any from Dr. Cash?
Well, this Saturday is the opening of the Engineering Academy's new building
Yes,
at Dos
yes.
Pueblos. And I'm hopeful some of you, if not all of you, will be there.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, then, future agenda items. I know we have a lot of future agenda items already. Are there any more that we are adding on? Ms. Limon?
Perhaps a future, not immediate, but we talked a little bit maybe about discipline policy related to clarifying some I'm trying to get the wording right, clarifying some aspects regarding two strikes. Well, that too, but I was actually thinking more recent on my mind, some language clarifying how we're going to deal with student misconduct around academic integrity.
Okay.
And I don't think that that's the actually official wording of the policy, but
It is the academic.
Integrity?
Well,
Oh,
it's part of the 5144 exhibit. Item 28.
So you would like that placed on as a discussion item?
Okay.
At some point, with all the emphasis on teacher evaluation, I know we have a pilot test program going on now with teacher evaluation that I don't think we've had a formal presentation on. So I would like to have more information on that in light of, it's a very important topic right at the moment.
Okay.
I'm not quite confident, and I know Mr. Sumter is not here, and he's quite a capable person, that we're going to be able to get all of the issues resolved regarding the canine detection in 2 weeks. The biggest issue is communicating with what appears to be all of our stakeholders. I don't know that could be accomplished in the next, not 8 days or so. So I don't believe that, absent some superhuman effort, that would be back before you at the next board meeting, unless you would like it there just to talk about again.
No, I think.
right. And I'll clarify my comments. I think it's going to be hard to reach everybody. I just want for me, my comment was really around making an effort. So even on e-news, sending an email. So I'm not opposed to seeing it in 2 weeks, but I think it's going to be really hard to get everybody before.
Yeah.
But I do
I felt the same way, is that just an effort to let more people know than that currently know.
But I do think I would prefer to have it come back to us when there has been some meaningful interaction with the community, rather than trying to rush it into 2 weeks if that's not really
Thank you.
workable.
Thank you.
Is that, okay.
I was going to be rude and look at my calendar. I know the DLAC meeting is coming up. I just am uncertain if it's in the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to all 3 high schools' PTA meetings this month, but I don't think it's before the next board meeting.
Okay.
So, right, and I certainly will,
Yes.
I'll make sure parents know that will be something I'll talk about, and we'll talk to them, get their feedback on it. From all 3 ELACs, the DLAC, and all 3 PTA meetings.
Okay, then I guess that brings us to